Well, thank you, Dean Peterson, and thank all of you for showing up tonight. I'm going to try to get as much as I can in as short a time as I can. I think I have 30 minutes, so I'm going to try to get as much as I can. The young lady that I asked to come down, she's a living prop that I brought along with me. She's one of my mentees, and I'm going to get her to tell her story. And so I'm going to go through my talk fairly quickly so she'll have time to tell her story. She actually has worked with me from high school, went off and did her thing other places, and has come back to be my last graduate student. So, mentoring, a tool for success in any field. Mentoring, quite often as teachers or professors, we think that we're automatically mentors, but mentoring is really more than teaching, and I think all of us recognize that. That mentoring actually functions in 4 different roles. One is as a teacher. The second role is as a counselor. You exchange opinions and ideas with your mentee. And intervener. So you help the mentee, and you sponsor them quite often. They were for scholarships and those sort of things, and pointing out pathways that they may not know of. So what are the benefits of mentoring? I mean, certainly for the mentee, there are many benefits, and those include advice and guidance from a counselor with greater experience, lasting friendship, improving self-confidence and self-esteem, increased motivation, yellow brick road to success. I term the yellow brick road as the path that students go on when they're successful. Now, the mentee is not the only one that benefits from mentoring. In fact, the mentor benefits also. Opportunity to develop skills in understanding and working with others, increase understanding, experience, deep inner satisfaction. I can't think of any greater satisfaction than I get when I get a letter from a student who says, "You may not remember me, but I had you in this class and I came up and talked to you and you changed my life." And I've gotten many, many letters like that. And quite often I don't remember the person. As a young woman who I met at the Claremont colleges, Harvey Mudd and those sort of things, we had a 10-minute discussion. And she is now a professor at Arizona State. She and her husband, professor at Arizona State, simply because of that 10-minute discussion. That's a long story that I have to tell you about, but she didn't come to LSU, but because of me, she went on to graduate school. And in fact, I received an email from her father before I met him. I've met him since, thanking me for having that conversation because that 10-minute conversation changed her life. So there are many stories like that that I could tell. And in developing, in mentoring people, you develop other mentors. In fact, the reason that I'm a mentor is because there were many, many people along the way that mentored me. I'm a little country boy from Bunkie, Louisiana. And before I forget, I sometimes forget, I want to acknowledge the greatest mentor in my life, and that's my wife, Werner. Della comes from a very different background than I am. I'm a little country boy from Bunkie, Louisiana. She comes from a family of educators. And there were many things that she helped me with. For example, many of you don't know, I mean, you've seen Michael Jackson when he was alive do the robot. But many of you don't know that I invented the robot because I didn't know how to move. And so Della and I were dating. And she said, "You don't know how to dance?" I said, "No, I don't know how to dance." She said, "Well, let me put some music on and let me see you move. So she put the music on and saw me move, and she said, I can work with that. And now when we go out to dance, we stay on the floor the entire time, and everyone thinks we're the best dancers in the whole place. All because she took a little country boy and tried to cultivate him. That's just one example of all the mentoring she's done. So why am I a mentor? In 2004, I received an award called the From Whence We Came Award. It was given by the Allstate Company. So I got a little statue, got some money. I even got my picture on a calendar. I think I was month number 6 or 7, I don't remember. But that award, in my opinion, characterized me more than any other award I've received. In terms of monetary amount, it's probably one of the smallest awards I have received, but it characterized me. The award was given as a representation of the Sankofa bird. The Sankofa bird, pictured here, flying toward the future while looking toward the past. And if you notice in its mouth, it has something in its mouth. It has an egg in its mouth. And that egg encourages us to plant a seed that is mentored the future generation. So Sankofa comes from the country of Ghana. They have many symbolic symbols, and the Sankofa bird is one of them. This is my rendition of the Sankofa birds. There are many different renditions, but I think that's a powerful symbol. Do not forget your past as you move toward the future, and at the same time, protect the future by mentoring young people. And so that is the essence of what I believe in. And I believe in it so strongly that I have had many, many students that I've mentored, and I mentor my graduate students, and that's a delicate balance, because sometimes they think as a mentor I'm their buddy, but sometimes I've got to install that discipline, and they don't understand it always. Well, you were just friends with me a minute ago, now you're trying to tell me what to do. Right, Kelsey? Yeah, so I want to thank Kelsey for doing this photograph here for me. And the idea of mentoring is quite often the mentee will encounter a brick wall. On the other side of that brick wall is a goal. And they can't figure out how to get across that brick wall to the goal. And what I like to characterize mentoring is breaking that brick wall. Mentoring will shatter that brick wall and allow them, and I can tell you some impossible stories, some stories that you could never believe that a student could accomplish, but just by mentoring them and encouraging them, they accomplish impossible goals. I never give up on a student. A student will often give up on themselves, but I will never give up on a student. So I'd like to tell some brick wall stories, and I don't have, but Sally's story, Kurt's story, and Unique's story. And what I'm going to do, Sally's story has a unique ending. There's always a path to your goal if you work hard enough. I'm going to leave that to, if you have some questions at the end and you want me to tell Sally's story, I'll do it at the end. There's also Kurt. Do not let anyone else define you. Only you can do that. And I'm giving you these lessons learned so that if you want me during the question session to expand on either of those stories, I will do so. But the young lady I asked to come around is Unique. And I sort of told you the beginning of her story. And the lesson learned here is your mentor will help you guide you towards your best options. And so I'm going to let her come and tell about our interactions from the time she was 15 years old, worked in my laboratory, to her current position now as my last graduate student I'm ever going to take.
Hi, I'm Unique Luna. I am starting my second year in the PhD program here at LSU in the chemistry department. and I'll try to be as quick as possible, but I did meet Dr. Werner as a teenager. I'm from Washington, D.C. My parents are both from third world countries, and my brother, I have 3 older brothers that are significantly older than me, so one of my brothers, who was the only one that went for a higher education, was in the LSU graduate program when I was in high school. And while he was in graduate school, my mother passed to stomach cancer. But before she did, she had a feeling that she wasn't going to live long, so she started to send my sister and I in the summers to Louisiana to stay with my brother, and it was a way for us to develop independency away from her, because we were spoiled. And so we did that, and a few summers later, she did pass. Right one of the summers we were down here, we went up, and she passed like 2 weeks later. So then the following summers, I did meet Dr. Werner, because I was taking high school honors courses here. And once I completed as much as I could, my brother told me I needed to get a job. So I created a resume. Dr. Werner, my brother met Dr. Werner and showed him my resume. He said, yeah, I'll take a high school student. And my brother convinced me that all I will be doing is washing dishes, like the flasks and things like that. I won't actually be doing research. And I was very intimidated. And the first day I get in there, Dr. Werner's like, so this is the project you're going to be working on, and you're going to be working with this postdoc. And I told my brother he lied to me. So Dr. Werner had me working as a high school student, giving presentations at the group meetings, even told me to apply to a scholarship, the Gates Millennium Scholars Program. That it was the second time I heard of it. And I knew I qualified for it, but I didn't think I would get it because it's a nationwide scholarship. But Dr. Werner was very insistent. And when I went back to D.C., he kept calling me, almost felt like every day. I don't know how often it was, but it was a lot. And I was still in high school. And he said, Unique, have you finished your application? He turned in his recommender form. My AP calculus teacher turned in his nomination form, and all that was left was my personal statement, my application. And I didn't want to do it because I knew I was not going to get it, and it just didn't make sense to waste my time doing something that I was going to get rejected. I knew I was top dog in D.C., but the whole United States, there's no way I would get it. But he was very insistent. He introduced me to people that made me feel even more insecure because the guy told me I didn't have a high SAT score. So I definitely did not want to apply anymore. Dr. Werner said, I'm sorry, ignore that guy, just apply anyways. So in the end, I ended up applying because I didn't want to lie to him, and I didn't want to disappoint him. And I'm glad I did, because in the end, I did get the scholarship. And I learned that I'm my own worst enemy. And why tell myself no when the possibility of getting a yes is out there? So from that moment on, Dr. Werner's been very influential in my life because he opened my eyes. And that change, that persistence and his belief in me and not giving up on me, even though I essentially was giving up on myself and the possibility of my future, because neither of my parents were educated. Their English wasn't that good. My mom passed. One of my brothers only went to college. So I didn't really have much to go on. And here's this college professor telling me I can do it. It was very powerful. So for me, I always want to give back, and I always want to mentor, and because I want to be a Dr. Werner to other people. But I stayed in contact with Dr. Werner throughout all these years. I did go to a graduate program at Case Western. I had trouble fitting and connecting while still being insecure and having my own struggles, and I guess not really having mentors in that environment that can cater to me or that knew how to speak my language, and I couldn't speak their language. So I, in the end, left with my master's after 5 years. So it felt, I hit a huge ego blow. I started feeling like I'm not good enough again. I did work for the government, for the Department of Defense afterwards, and I was making money, but I wasn't feeling fulfilled. Dr. Werner called me up January of 2018 asking me to be his last PhD student. And I instantly cried because I do want my PhD. I don't know why I didn't complete it the first time. I don't understand what went wrong. And sometimes I get emotional when I tell this story, so bear with me if I start crying. And so here I am, trying to do my best. I knocked it out in the fall. I did really well. Come spring, when it's just research time, I get intimidated again. The whole research aspect and feeling like I'm not good enough because that's what stopped me the first time. I did really well academically, but the research messed me up. I couldn't figure out how to get over that insecurity. So here I am struggling again come March, and then in May, my dad dies. He had a heart attack. So I'm just like, wow, really? Like the same thing my older brother experienced 18 years ago. Here I am in graduate school going through the same thing. So I still am currently going through a lot. And Dr. Werner has been very helpful and still very persistent in pushing, and he, helping me. And because I know Dr. Werner too, like I do think, how he says sometimes students don't understand his motives. Like even if he says something that makes me cry, I know where he's coming from. Like I know what he's trying to say. And so I have finally started getting back into my research. I'm starting to build my confidence again. And it makes me cry. And I'm sorry, this is very fresh. I am emotional on this one. I can't help it. But, I'm excited because I'm feeling motivated to do this research, and I can see the confidence. I'm building that confidence again, and it feels really great. But at the same time, it makes me a little bit sad because my father won't be there when I graduate. And my goal was he just needs to be alive for 2 more years. Like I kept pushing because I was like, Pop, you got to take care of yourself, be good. And we even had that communication. I was like, no, you need to take care of yourself, Bobby. Like you need to be there in a couple years when I graduate, physically be there. And, and he said he would. So, it hurts because we specifically had that conversation. But I'm still doing my best, and Dr. Werner has been very helpful, Mrs. Werner as well. The Werner Research Group, extremely helpful. Everyone's been extremely understanding in this. I have so many mentors being here at LSU. Like, just comparing LSU to my experience at Case Western is completely different. That was not the environment for me, and I didn't realize. And I think Dr. Werner had a mentoring workshop, and there was something about having, I don't even, it was church. I went to church right after my father died, the Sunday after I went to church, and the pastor talked about how pit bulls are these strong dogs. They can take a lot, but if they're in the wrong environment, they won't survive. If you take a pit bull in Alaska, ask him to, take these sleds on and survive the cold, the pit bull will not survive in that environment. And so understanding that you have strong people in the wrong environment and being able to acknowledge that. So I've been experiencing mentorship from my friends, my group, Dr. Werner, Mrs. Werner, church, even the pastor, just that message, attending workshops, so I'm all about this mentorship. And sometimes you don't realize you're being mentored or that you're even mentoring others. So I'm really grateful to be here, and I know I'm making progress, and I'm sorry for just divulging all that information, but I like sharing because I do think we're all going through something, and maybe you guys aren't as comfortable talking about it as I am, but I like to talk, so. But yeah, that's all I have, and so thank you, Dr. Werner, for this opportunity to share my story.
I tell my students not to cry because I end up crying with them. I'd be glad to answer any questions, or I can go over some of the other mentoring experiences I had with one of the other 2 students. They're both really special stories. You'd like to hear them? Let's go. Let's talk about Sally. Sally was an LSU freshman, came into my lab and said, I hear that you like to work with undergraduates. I said, yes, that's true. And I'm going to make this long story short. And so she had recently gotten married. And I said, look, young lady, if you're going to work with me, I want you to work with me the entire time. I don't want you quitting after a few months. She said, Dr. Werner, don't worry about that. Very interested in research. 6 months later, she comes, Dr. Werner, I can't work in the lab. I said, I told you you need to work the entire time. Well, I'm pregnant, and I don't want to get my son or my child, it turns out it's a son later, exposed to these chemicals. I said, okay, I understand that. And she says, well, I'll be back. I said, sure you will. Never expected her to come back. But after she had her baby, she came back and started working again. And somewhere along the way, maybe in her junior year, she ended up getting a divorce. So here she is, a single parent with a child, and so bright that I really wanted her to go on to graduate school. And she said, Dr. Werner, forget about that. You know, I can't go to graduate school. I've got too much debt, and plus I've got a child. I said, well, Sally, do you have relatives who live near a university? She said, yes. My parents live near Auburn University, and my sister lived near Wake Forest. I said, apply to those schools. Dr. Werner, I'll apply, but I tell you, I'm not going to school. I'm going to pay my debt off. And I need to do that. I need to work to pay the debt off. And so she applied to those schools. And meanwhile, I kept dropping little notes on her desk, little articles about single women, went on with careers and had children along the way and all of that. And she couldn't figure out who was dropping those notes on her desk until one day she just said, Dr. Werner, I know you're doing this, and you need to quit playing with my mind. And so, make a long story short, she did get into Auburn University. Well, she got into both universities. But she said, okay, I got into Auburn. I'm still in debt, and I need to pay my debt off. I'm not going to graduate school. I said, Sally, what if you got a fellowship to Auburn? She said, Dr. Werner, my chances of getting a fellowship are essentially non-existent, you know, because I've been working so much, and with my kid, my grades aren't what, she had about a 3.1, 3.2. I've gotten her permission to tell her story, so I'm talking about a student's grade, but she gave me her permission to tell her story. And so I said, you're going to get a fellowship to Auburn. She said, Dr. Werner, you're dreaming. So I called up Auburn University and told them what a wonderful young lady they had. You need to give her a fellowship or you're going to lose her to some of the top schools like Wake Forest. And 2 weeks later, Sally comes in, Dr. Werner, I've got a fellowship to Auburn. Well, to make a long story short, Sally now has her PhD. And if you ever go to Los Angeles and see all that smog that's cleared out, Sally is running that whole operation of environmental, she's an environmental person taking care of all the elements of the smog and all of that in the Los Angeles area. And so that's where there's always a path to your goal if you work hard enough. Kurt was a young man raised in Chicago by a single parent, often getting in trouble, hanging around with the wrong people. So his mother found out about a boarding school on the East Coast and decided to send him to this boarding school. They readily accepted him because he was an outstanding athlete. At the end of his 4 years, he graduated with about a 2.5 average. And his counselor said, okay, young man, you're graduating from high school. What are you going to do? And he says, I'm going to be a medical doctor. And the counselor literally laughed in his face. He said, come on, son, be serious. 2.5 GPA. How in the world are you going to get into medical school? Kurt said, well, you know something? That 2.5 is what you guys expected of me, and I accepted that. I am a much better student than that, and I can do much better than that. And so Kurt ended up, I was on the faculty at Emory, and he ended up at Emory University because of his high aptitude. He had a high ACT despite his 2.5 GPA. To make a long story short, I mentored Kurt along the way, and in his senior year, he's sitting in my office. Now, I know the background that he comes from. But he tells me, Dr. Werner, you know, the students at Emory are very rich. I said, I know that, Kurt. I mean, they drive better cars than I drive, you know. And he says, you know, my roommate has a full-screen television and drives a BMW. I say, that's nice, Kurt. He says, but I'm wealthier than my roommate. And I looked at him to see if he was serious. He was very serious. I said, Kurt, how can you be wealthier than your roommate? I know your background. He said, Dr. Werner, my roommate has a color television, drives a BMW, but I've got a 3.95 GPA. I said, wow, you are wealthier than your roommate. Make a long story short, Kurt went on to Cornell Medical School, graduating near the top of his class. And after he graduated, he called me up. I said, Kurt, go by and talk to that high school counselor. And he says, I'm not going to waste my time, Dr. Werner. Now, this is the part of the story that makes me very sad because I feel maybe I didn't do everything I was supposed to do. Kurt went back to Chicago during his residency, and I was telling this story, and I went by and I called up the dean. I said, what's the latest on Kurt? And she said, you haven't heard? I said, heard what? She said, he's dead. Dead? How did he die? Well, he went back to Chicago, medical degree, got caught up with that gang that he used to run with, found him in an alley dead of a drug overdose. And that's a sad loss. Sad loss, because that young man was destined for great things. And so the moral of the story is do not let anyone define you, like that counselor tried to define him. Only you can do that. Define yourself. That's what I tell my students and tell the students that I mentor. Define yourself. Don't let anyone tell you you're not capable of going to medical school. You're not capable of majoring in STEM. You're not capable of doing mathematics. You define that. You know your capabilities, and you define that. And one of the things I always tell students, doesn't matter about your background. What matters is how hard you're willing to work. That's the only thing that matters. I didn't even know what a PhD was until I was in college. My chairman of my department said, Mr. Werner, you'll have your PhD before you're 30. I said, Dr. White, what's a PhD? How can you aspire for a PhD if you don't know what it is? I grew up during the times when schools were segregated. The highest mathematics I had was Algebra 2. I had never heard the word calculus until I got into college. Yet, when I got into college, I loved mathematics so much that I didn't take my biology laboratory because I didn't want to cut up animals. In my senior year, biology laboratory was required, so I had to take biology laboratory. I went to the chair and said, look, I think an advanced mathematics class will be more beneficial to me than biology laboratory, and because I'm going on to graduate school. He said, yeah, I agree with that, and I got him. I've never had a biology laboratory, although I'm doing some biological research. I went to graduate school and took an advanced mathematics, a graduate level mathematics class with mathematics majors. Now, I'm not a math major, but I led the class. There was nothing wrong with me. There was something wrong with Louisiana in that it programmed me for failure, but I am a success despite that programming. And so many students are programmed for failure. A counselor will say, you don't want to take that math class, it's too hard. You don't want to take that class, it's too tough. And so these kids come to school often not prepared, not through any fault of their own, not because they're not capable. I believe that any student who works hard enough can get their goal in life, can get to their goal in life. Every experience I've had demonstrates that to me. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.